I'm fully convinced that we can do this. The health of our bodies and the health of ecosystems are equally important concerns to us. I'm a professor, I profess.
Welcome to Madden Science, everybody, and welcome to our Skype. We are excited to be joined today by Dr. Sean Carroll, who comes to us from University of Wisconsin-Madison and also from Howard Hughes Medical Institute's Biointeractive.
If you like writing, do as much of it as you can, and if you don't like writing, do as much of it as you can. I go for comedies. Oh, wow. Let me tell you, if I had the answer to that question, I'd be working on it all day long. Well, that's a great discussion point for all of you to have. So in terms of keystone species, I guess I'm still going to have to go with the sea otter because who would expect it, right? So he's surprising. And come on, they're incredibly cute.
Here you can see Dr. Carroll's website, some of my favorite books, the Serengeti Rules. You can also see some of his other incredible works, including The Making of the Fittest and Endless Forms Most Beautiful. Here's a look at Dr. Carroll's website, the Carroll Laboratory over at University of Wisconsin-Madison. Check him out on Amazon. Tons of amazing books. He's a prolific writer, an excellent writer, and in today's Skype, he'll talk about that process and the importance of writing. We're also giant fans of Dr. Carroll and his work at Biointeractive, where he's been working recently to help educators and students in their understanding of science and biology and evolution.
Scientists are making observations and conducting experiments that would have surprised Charles Darwin. And they're discovering new insights into what the great naturalist called the mystery of mysteries: how new species form.
In the complex battle of life, one of the constant struggles is between seeing and not being seen, the evolutionary game of hide and seek. And we've come here to the Valley of Fire in New Mexico, a battlefield, to find one of the tiniest soldiers and what it can teach us about how evolution works.
While recording this Skype with Dr. Carroll, we had a number of technical difficulties. First question that was asked that got cut off was, can you tell us a little bit about your background? Where did you go to school? What kinds of things did you study? And what were you like in high school? That's where we join in with the conversation.
Like animals, what did you do? Did you work in a zoo? So I didn't quite know, but I think as I went off to college and as soon as I started to meet biology faculty and understood what they did, then I was like, I want to do that, something in that range, whatever you people did to sort of study nature. And in high school, what am I going to say? Maybe one of the best parts of my growing up was I grew up in the same neighborhood the whole time, until I left Ohio, and had a lot of close buddies, and sports were a big thing for me through all of my growing up, and I guess I spent a lot of time, pretty much outside playing ball, whatever season it was, and that was really important to me, and I think that shaped a lot of sort of my ability to be a team player in science.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
I'm Chris G, and I wanted to know what are your most and least favorite things about being a scientist.
All right, Chris, my most favorite stuff about being a scientist, I've never been bored a day in my life. Totally honest, never been bored. The only thing that can, the only way I can be bored is if you force me to sit in a long meeting. And I think that's because I'm around people all the time who are asking new questions, who are really passionate about what they're doing. And there's so many different things going on. I got friends that are paleontologists that are out in the world, looking for new bones. I got friends that, work on all sorts of different kinds of creatures. And there's new blood always coming in. So young people are constantly entering science, and there's a lot of energy in it because of that. So, it's just a constant stream of ideas and energy. And it's been like that for 35 plus years. Oh, least favorite. Yeah, sorry, I left that part out. The least favorite part about science is that strangely, the reporting of results, like in publications and things, is a really inefficient, time-consuming, and kind of frustrating process. There's just structurally, that and probably funding are two difficult, bureaucratic, slow and annoying, frustrating aspects of science. So it's kind of the bureaucracy can get in the way of the amount of time you really want to spend doing science.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, thanks for the question.
Hi, it's Drew.
Hey, Drew.
My question is, what and who inspired you to become a scientist?
Well, I certainly got a lot of encouragement along the way, but I'll trace sort of like the first event, I'm pretty sure, is there was a nature show when I was growing up that at the time was in black and white called Wild Kingdom, Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. And the show kind of went to different parts of the world every week, and you saw wildlife, and they had various adventures. I think they've made new versions of it, you know, later forms of the program, but that to me was a ticket, you know, a passport to sort of the world and all these different sort of marvelous places. And I think, you know, sometime probably around age 10 or so, I thought, wow, I really want to go to these places, the world, you know, to Africa or to South American jungles or whatever, and see them. And I think it was that kind of, you know, inspiration that kept drawing me into biology. And then along the way, all sorts of people have encouraged me, you know, whether it was a great teacher in a classroom. I had a chemistry teacher in high school who was absolutely phenomenal, one of the greatest teachers I've ever seen in any setting. I had mentors as an undergraduate. I went to undergraduate in St. Louis, in Washington University in St. Louis. And sort of each step along the way had people who were, you know, helping making my way easier or, you know, pointing some opportunities out to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Christine.
Hi, Christine.
What is your favorite movie?
All right, so I go for comedies. Oh man, it's tough to say a favorite. Look, if I'm gonna throw one on and just really enjoy the whole tale, it's The Big Lebowski. So how many have seen it?
You can't see it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm King Zeus, and I would like to know what your favorite book is.
Hey, Zeus, my favorite book. Oh, wow. You know, it's hard to pick one. You know, when I mean, if I asked you the same thing as I said your favorite your favorite musician or your favorite movie, it's hard to pick one out. Favorite book. What did I just think was awesome? Why am I see? Well, because people ask me this from time to time, and I usually give them 5 or 6. So I'm gonna say Kurt Vonnegut's Breakfast with Champions. All right, and the reason for that is that I probably read it about grade, a little younger, and it's a rebellious, naughty book. And I think the idea that books have ideas in there that were almost private jokes between the writer and the reader, I always liked that aspect of books. And so to me, you know, the books I had to read in English class were one thing, you know, and if they weren't kind of written in, you know, contemporary times, and sometimes it's, you know, it's hard to relate to Charles Dickens. But Vonnegut stood out to me that he wrote with great humor, and yet he had some profound things to say. All right?
Okay, thank you.
Sure, thanks. Tough question, as it turns out.
I'm Emma. I would like to know what your favorite animal is and why.
Emma, it's probably snakes, because that's what got me started in biology. And I still, at my age, look for opportunities to see snakes in the wild wherever I am. Australia, Africa, the American West, places that have pretty interesting things to go look for. I am not a brave, you know, person. I'm not going to go pick up a rattlesnake. I'm not going to grab a 10 or 12-foot python. I'm happy just to take pictures. But I guess it's probably the variety, and they're not commonly seen. So they're you know, you have to make some effort, I think, to see them. And so I guess I like the fact that they're kind of mysterious and secretive, and so it's a nice surprise when you find one. And I like their body patterns. I like all the color and stripes and spots and diamonds and all that sort of stuff. So as a group, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Fawn. What is your favorite place you have traveled and why?
What is my favorite place? There was a little noise I couldn't hear. My favorite place?
To travel.
Oh, to travel.
Yeah.
You're going to do it to me again. I'm going to say, because I've been there each of the last 2 years, Africa. And it's because the scenery is just jaw-dropping, and the wildlife numbers are mind-boggling. So yeah, it's going to be Africa, but there's a lot of close seconds.
Hi, I'm Waverly. I'd like to know what do you do? Can you tell us about your average day?
Average day, really well. I work a lot, but I try to write a little bit in the mornings. So I try to write when I'm fresh. So I do a lot of writing. I've written a lot of books. I'm doing some more writing right now, and I got to do that when I'm fresh. And the rest of the workday is generally dealing with people. So it's either people I work with here in Chevy Chase. We work on a lot of films. I've got a whole bunch of films going on at the moment, and that means we're reviewing cuts, looking at scripts, we're talking to producers, we're talking to distributors like broadcaster channels and things like that. I'm doing a little bit of chatting with my lab. So I actually I have a lab at the University of Wisconsin, so I was just on Skype with them before I came on with you. And then I try to get out sometime in the day, and for me, at my decrepit old age, golf is one of my ways of relaxing. So I try to get 2 or 3 rounds in a week. It just turns out that hitting a ball is something I like doing, and walking across grass is therapeutic. So, and people ask me, do I have any ideas while I'm playing golf? And the answer is no. I am completely brain dead. It just takes everything out. I think about nothing out there but just hitting the next shot. So it's really, really relaxing. So I guess that's a typical day. A little bit of writing, a little bit of collaborating with other people, and if I can, a little bit of fresh air. Thanks, Waverly.
Yes. Hi, Dr. Carroll. We were wondering, writing in high school is so important, such a great skill. Wondering about your writing process. You know, how much time does it take? How do you fit it in? How do you work on kind of style and delivery? I mean, we love your book. It seems as if you're equally great at being a scientist and a writer. So, wondering if you could tell us about some of that process.
Well, I thank you for that. Really, you know, I guess the thing I would encourage everybody in the class is that, you know, if you like writing, do as much of it as you can. And if you don't like writing, do as much of it as you can. I compare this with a lot of people and talk about this in a lot of people in all sorts of professions. And good writing, the ability to express yourself on paper, is a pretty rare skill. And it helps in every business, law, science, teaching, right? So, and it's not easy. You know, every time I start with a blank page, it's like, you know, it's like hauling rocks uphill, right? But, you know, if you are inclined to do it, as I said, I just encourage people to do it. And if it is your weak spot and you think you might be going into any area where writing's going to matter, I'd really say work on it. And what working on it means is do more of it and get feedback on it. Because I think if people can say, well, you know, you're not clear this way, and you can start to learn some tools about, you know, how do you start a story, you know, looking for a hook and things like this. And so I guess I would say to everybody, and it's not, you know, in general, it's all about storytelling. So, you know, if you like to tell stories about anything, you know, what you did last night, a game, a movie, your friends, whatever, writing, you know, comes down to storytelling.
And storytelling, there's a lot of room for you know, personal style and things like that in storytelling. But, you know, people crave a good story, right? I mean, everybody is, you know, what you're going to watch tonight, you know, on the web or on TV, what you may go see this weekend, what you might listen to on a podcast, it's all about storytelling. So even, you know, and perhaps especially for science, storytelling is really important. Science is done by people. So who are these people? What are they doing? You know, how did they get, you know, into the places where they did, and what question were they asking, and what did they see, and what did that made them think, and, you know, what were the right paths and what were the wrong paths? And it's pretty similar to a lot of other human affairs if you boil it down to the ingredients of story. So that's a long answer of, I just try to find the story ingredients, and it's kind of hard to describe, you know, how you do that. That there is something that's kind of instinctual there of saying, well, you know, I may hear a little snippet about somebody. I'm like, well, there's the hook, you know, right there. You know, the Nobel Committee called somebody when they were, you know, having fish and chips and a beer at an Australian pub. I know where my story is going to start, right? You know, with that phone call. So it's that sort of thing. And my process, as I was saying before, I generally try to write in the morning because it's fresh. And there's a funny thing about, you also try to leave off where you know you're going to pick up. You know, what I was going to say was that a little trick is, especially if you're writing a longer piece, but even if you're writing an assignment that has multiple parts, is to stop where you know where you're going to pick up. The hardest thing is to sort of pick up a hanging end where you don't know what's coming next. And so I would always do that. Even today, I'll leave tomorrow's writing. I know where I'm going to pick up. And the brain kind of lets that churn around during the rest of the day and overnight, and you can sort of pick up again in the morning with momentum. So, and I think I've picked up that habit, and I've read a few other writers who've talked about their writing process, and it seems to be fairly common.
All right, cool, thanks.
Hi, I'm Summer, and I was wondering, how do you think so many different species came to evolve?
Hi, Summer. I think the big thing to think about is that there's so many ways to make a living in the world, and it just seems like almost every job is filled in nature. I think one of the things, I don't know if you saw this film, Mr. Madden mentioned a film, we made a bunch of films, but there's a film we made on lizards in the Caribbean.
The diversity of animals on our planet is breathtaking. Millions of species adapted to all kinds of habitats. Ever since Darwin, understanding how so many species evolved has been a major quest of biology and biologists like Jonathan Losses. In the Caribbean, he's studying a remarkable group of lizards.
She will be back.
He's finding clues to their origins in their bodies, their lifestyles, and in their DNA.
Oh, there's one out there.
These lizards are providing fresh insight into both how new species form and why our world is filled with so many creatures.
And I went down and saw this, and it's just pretty amazing that these lizards called anoles, and they, in a given tree, there's like 4 different species that are kind of, you know, living at sort of at different apartment levels in the tree. They're living different lifestyles, whether they live on big fat lower branches or skinnier upper branches, and their body size is different and what they eat is different. And it just made me appreciate how anywhere you look, there's something, you know, exploiting whatever resources are there. And as life becomes more diverse, there's of course yet more jobs that can take place in a more diverse biosphere. And so I think it's sort of a snowball running downhill, that diversity sort of begets more diversity. I think it's the way to think. I think it's to think about sort of how many ways there are to make a living in nature, and you'll see somebody or, you know, some things doing it. And I'm everywhere I go, I'm impressed by just how numerous the creatures are, you know, in any given place. Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Dr. Carroll. My name is Paul, and I was wondering what you think would happen if humans were removed from Earth, like entirely, like just totally wiped out.
Well, it would save us a lot of political reporting, for sure. I mean, I'm tired of CNN right now. So I think if humans disappeared, I think it'd be pretty amazing if you could sort of just keep a time-lapse camera running of how quickly the Earth would sort of cover with greenery. And, I mean, our cities, you'd still see tall skyscrapers poking through for a while, but, I think the change in just a century would be pretty amazing. When you look at places that have been like natural disasters, you know this in places like Mount St. Helens, that, it's amazing in a pretty short period of time how things can regrow from being completely blown away. So, I think the oceans would refill and landscape would cover over in less than a century. Thanks. Next question.
Hi, I'm Masika, and it's a kind of long question, but I'm wondering what your thoughts are on some controversial topics like climate change and evolution versus creationism. What do you think needs to happen in order to better educate our country?
Well, let me tell you, if I had the answer to that question, I'd be working on it all day long. I got to be honest. I think there's a lot of people, who are really concerned, but and we don't really quite understand why is there this standoff. I mean, evolution and creationism, I mean, this is a matter that's been settled for, not, you could say take a little time after Darwin, but I mean, easily for a century. So the answer may not be entirely in education. I think we have to look at, how do people develop the beliefs that they have, and we need to understand, really, I think, why people are not inclined to change those beliefs, what risks they encounter by changing the way they're thinking. And so I think it's probably more the realm of psychology and social science than it is a matter of science. The science has been there for a long time. So there are a lot of people trying to crunch that. And I think on climate change, it's kind of a classic story of denialism. If you look back in history, I think the best thing you can do is look in history at things like the debate over tobacco that took place for several decades. That the evidence was accumulating, but there was a powerful and resistant lobby, and they appealed to lots of things: people's individual freedoms to smoke, to do whatever they wanted, even at those health consequences to themselves. There were a lot of arguments being made not to regulate cigarettes, not to restrict their sale, not to restrict, the smoking in public places and things like that. If you look at that, there's very similar sort of narrative as you see around climate change. First sort of doubting the science, and then saying, well, what are we going to do about it anyway? And we don't want to, we can't change our way of life. It will cost too much. And just a whole lot of arguments being sort of thrown up, but it doesn't change the fact that, we're on a path to where the Earth is changing. We're not quite sure what the magnitude of those effects are going to be. So we got to get past the denialism to have any shot at actually, addressing the real problem. And, again, so I don't have the answers because humans we're complicated creatures. We're not evidence-based robots, right? That just say, oh, there's the evidence, I will act this way. So and funny enough, I'll circle back to the evolution creationism issue, and maybe this is true for climate change. I think for climate change, when certain organizations, like let's say oil companies, which fully factor climate change into their projections, and the Pentagon, which fully factors climate change into their future planning, when that's appreciated, they're sort of like, well, wait a second, if everybody's making plans, regarding climate change, then I guess, we can't stay in denial for so long. And I think in the evolution creationism story, when you realize that so many faiths and so many clergy fully accept evolution, but take faith very seriously, then people see another facet to this. They see that it's quite possible for people to hold both views. And that sort of polar exclusion between evolution and creationism sort of dissolves away in the face of that fact. So often I think what breaks through these sort of stalemates is that people who you would think are in one camp actually develop a different point of view. Clergy with respect to evolution, or oil companies and the Pentagon and things like that with respect to climate change. And that's kind of a sign that we are on a slow but eventual path to acceptance. Thanks. Sorry for the long answer. I'm a professor. I profess. Yeah.
Hi, it's Jalen again. I was wondering, what's your favorite keystone species, and why are some organisms more equal than others?
So, in terms of keystone species, I guess I'm still going to have to go with the sea otter because who'd expect it, right? So he's surprising, and come on, they're incredibly cute. And I think the effects are so dramatic on the coastal systems that, I'm glad it was discovered that way, that otters were a keystone, so it's a really important story in ecology, but I think it's just fortunate that it's such a dramatic effect that you almost couldn't miss it. And so in terms of some animals being more equal than others, I think we see that throughout biology at every level of organization, that all molecules are not equal when it comes to cancer or longevity or things like this, that some things are more important. And sort of the quest in science is to identify what those more important things are. So why some animals are more important? Did you say the question is why do I think that's the case? I don't think there is a why. I think there's just an is. What do you think?
Whatever you say goes.
I mean, well, maybe that's just to tell you you're asking a question that maybe interestingly doesn't have an answer of why would there be some species that matter more than others. Maybe that's something that ecologists have to think more about. It just turns out that in systems, for some reason, some things exert a more powerful force than others. So maybe we need to think more about it.
Tonight's homework is about that, so maybe tomorrow I'll email you back as to what they come up with.
Let's get some good answers on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Mira, and I was wondering to elaborate on the keystone species. Can the species that are considered keystone species change over time? Or they're like specifically set ones?
Oh no, I think we sort of must know that. I'm searching in my mind for any example where it's turned over, but we certainly know because of extinction, which is an ongoing process throughout time, that they have certainly changed. And that if you looked on the African savanna, or you look in the American plains, the species that dominated 100,000 years ago are different than the species that were there, 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. So there is turnover. I think the time scale of that, though, we don't know too well. I gave you a big chunk of time. I'm searching right now. Can I think of an example where we've seen change on human scale, observable time? And maybe not without something as dramatic, like say we go into a lake and we exterminate, all of something, then something else might take over. But that's not really, maybe you're thinking more of a natural transition of one to another. Yeah, and I can't think of a natural transition that's been observed. But certainly over longer periods of time, it absolutely has to happen because we know that species get replaced. Thank you.
Morning, Dr. Carroll. I'm Scott Rickles. And I was wondering, what are your thoughts on the ethics of genetic manipulation editing using techniques such as CRISPR?
And when you say ethics, do you mean in humans, or or in general?
Humans.
Humans. Well, that's a great discussion point for all of you to have, because it's very much likely going to be something your whole generation is going to face. Well, I think that I and the rest of the scientific community are comfortable with doing gene editing in somatic tissues of the body. In other words, not in the germline. So tissues changing your red, if you've got a immunodeficiency, changing your white blood cells. If you've got sickle cell anemia, changing your red blood cells. And it would only affect you and not be passed to your children. I think we're comfortable with that. But I think doing anything that is going to change the human gene pool, worries everybody. The first worry is perhaps safety. The second worry is where are the boundaries when it comes to that. I think that's, much bigger than a scientific conversation. That's a really broad societal conversation. And I suspect we're going to stay away from that for a long time. I think because there's other technologies that could, if you're concerned, maybe you're high risk of having a child, maybe a 25 or 50% chance of a major genetic disorder that could be fatal. And you might want to avoid that. You could think about editing your DNA, but you could also think about other reproductive interventions that are less traumatic, I guess I would say, and less profound. So I think for the next 10, 15 years, that's what I imagine will go on. We'll stay away from the human germline. Because there's just a concern that people are going to make designer children and I think based on history, people worry that could get out of hand in lots of ways.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Lucas, and I was wondering what your favorite experience was about the Serengeti.
Oh, wow. I think my favorite experience about the Serengeti was, and I do describe it in the beginning of the book, was I expected that as we went through the gates of the Serengeti, I'd see animals, kind of like stepping into the zoo. But all I saw was knee-high brown grass as far as the eye could see at first, and this really plain little gate. And I'm the only biologist in my family. I'm in a vehicle with 5 other members of my family, and I'm thinking, uh-oh, we're in trouble. I brought them all the way here to Africa, and where are the animals? And so it took maybe 20 miles of gravel road and dust before, and it turns out the animals move around because the water, the rains move around, and what the greenery is not, it's not all constantly green. And we finally got to an area that had some water holes and some creeks and some green grass and trees, and there were thousands of animals. And so it was that anxiety of, uh-oh, where are they? To, an hour and a half later, oh my gosh, seeing those huge numbers that I guess I love that flip. That was sort of my favorite moment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, it's me, Paul again. And I was wondering if you would consider humans as a keystone species, or if if we are kind of relating back to my other question about if we were removed, if we never existed, what species potentially could have came up, taken our spot at that keystone?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. I mean, you can ponder that one for a long time. That's a good one for discussion. So I'll just tell you that from an ecological point of view, because we've inserted ourselves into so many food chains, and we affect the numbers of so many things, and we affect the structure of so many communities, that the guy who coined the word, Bob Payne, who's at University of Washington, Seattle, he would say we're the over-dominant keystones, and we've got to recognize that role. If we were never around, the key thing about humans is our tool-making ability, right? I mean, we're not the most impressive primate until you take into account tool making. And that's made us, of course, so efficient at exploiting any habitat. We've moved all across the world. We're great at fishing. We're great at hunting. We've domesticated all these plants and animals for our own purposes. Pretty amazing. And we've done this in a pretty short period of time. So I don't know that we would think that there's anything else on the planet that looks like a good number 2 candidate for that role. We don't, you see some tool use in other primates, you see some tool use in birds and things like that, but But tools in our system of communication, you just don't see anything close to it in the rest of the animal kingdom. And I think that's the accelerant in that has just made the human influence explode across the globe, and in biologically really a short period of time. So I do claim to my wife that, you know, our dogs are always trying to talk to us, and with about 10,000 years more of work, you know, that they could talk, and by observation, they're going to learn to drive cars and to, you know, run at least machinery in the kitchen, stuff like that. So, you know, maybe a smart domesticated animal could be trained to do a lot of things. Certainly chimps and gorillas have learned a fair amount of sign language and things like that. They're still a long way away from humans.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Aaron, and I was wondering, in the Serengeti rules, we have a chapter called The Wisdom of the Body. How is the regulation and homeostasis similar in an organism and in an ecosystem?
Well, what we generally see in the body is that most of the forces in the body, most of the processes in the body work to sort of keep things stable. They sort of counterbalance whatever changes are taking place. You're running upstairs, you know, you feel your heart rate go up, it's pumping more blood, you feel your muscles get tired, you know, that's all the body's reaction to that activity. And those tissues are trying to sort of reset back to where you started. In ecosystems, well, I guess I'd say this, in the body, in terms of the concentration of substances, those are generally maintained in a constant range, whether that's salts or fats or hormones, things like that in the body. And you look out in ecosystems, and generally the numbers of everything are also regulated in ecosystem. Now, there's no, I mean, in a body, there's sort of natural selection works to keep the body alive, and so there's a lot of selection saying keep these substances the same thing. Ecosystems, there's no selection across the ecosystem. The ecosystem is what it is, and the relative abundance of parts can change, and the ecosystem can still exist. But I think the reason why I wrote this way in the book was to help people think about regulation on different scales of nature, and that there are reasons why there's, you know, so many wildebeest in the Serengeti and relatively few lions, and there's and biologists have started to figure out why that is the case. So it's really just an analogy. It's not, don't take the analogy too far, because maintaining your body the way it is really important, and things are out of range that, you know, it can be life-threatening. In an ecosystem, there's probably more play. Now, if you take it more fully, you know, my concern, and one of the things I express in the book, is that we've knocked ecosystems so far out of where they've been that their ability to continue to support us is in doubt. And so I was more like trying to make the analogy that the health of our bodies and the health of ecosystems are equally important concerns to us. So anyway, that's a bit of a ramble to just tell you that, you know, don't take the analogy too seriously, you know, too literally is what I'm saying. But at least take sort of the health implications of an ecosystem in, you know, that's healthy and resilient, and a body that just like your body, you want an ecosystem be in that condition. All right. Sorry, that was a meandering answer. I don't know. That's I must need caffeine for lunch.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Taylor, and I was wondering how research and scientific work is different in a lab setting versus a natural setting.
You mean like an outdoor setting? Yeah. And I love the sweatshirt, by the way, which would have reminded me to say one of my all-time favorite books. It's not Cat in the Hat, but it is Green Eggs and Ham. And I admire Dr. Seuss and Mel Blanc, who is the voice of Bugs Bunny and all those Warner Brothers characters, two of my all-time heroes in the world. So your sweatshirt reminds me of that. So I've never done serious research outdoors. I've been out with friends. I've been on, you know, I've tagged along with people on fossil hunts or a kudu tagging or whatever it might be. I think the really big difference is in the laboratory, you know, experiments in tiny test tubes, we tend to be able to control, virtually every parameter. The amount of this, the amount of that, the temperature. We replicate it, so it's easy, to do the same experiment 50 times, the same, 50 replicates the same day, that kind of thing. Totally different ball game outdoors. It's the scale of nature is such that it's very hard to control the variables. It's very hard to replicate time taken to that it takes to observe something. So to experiment on tide pools or to experiment on savannas, this is a lot harder than experimenting with cells and molecules. And so we have to appreciate the ecologists are up against a fundamentally greater challenge in controlling the variables and replicating their experiments as we do in the lab.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Peter.
Hi, Peter.
Is there a specific example where you think that your study of genetics and ecology were very similar?
Yeah, okay, see if you can buy this one. Here's what happened, the way it really went down. I was trying to educate myself a bit with ecology. And I'll just say I was trying to follow the logic. So have you guys studied now the sea urchin story, sea otter, sea urchin story? Does this ring a bell yet? No. So when I say logic, the logic is how, let's just call them A, B, and C, how A affects B and B affects C, and therefore A affects C in some way, okay? And I didn't know any of these principles from ecology. I've worked in another realm of biology, and these things weren't known when I was a student. So what I learned when I looked into the ecology is I said, I've seen this logic before. And time and again in genetics, in understanding the genetic logic of something, like how genes control some event in an animal body, the making of a spot, the making of a stripe, the building of some body part. There's a logic to how the genetic program unfolds. And usually the moment of discovery is when you realize you don't know all the components in that sequence of logic. So if you think that there's a whole sort of chain of events that are going to take place, if you don't know all the links in the chain, you're gonna not understand things. You're going to be lost. You're going to make mistakes. And those aha moments come from going, I didn't know that C existed. Now that I know C existed, I can figure it all out. I saw those same sort of logical sort of situations in ecology, which is until folks appreciated that a predator could influence plants by controlling the number of herbivores, which nobody predicted, then you wouldn't imagine a connection between, why would the number of sea otters affect, the amount of kelp? They didn't eat kelp, so why would that matter? So it's that sort of strong indirect connection that I've seen before in my own genetic research in 20 or 25 years. And I saw it happening out in ecology, and I thought, wow, they've had the same kind of aha moments that we've had, which is as soon as they found the missing link in a chain, they got it. They understood how the system worked. So that's the parallels that I saw. Sure, thanks for the question. I hope there was an answer in there somewhere.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth, and I was wondering, what is the most pressing scientific issue today?
The most pressing scientific issue today? Well, that's hard to pick out. I think pressing science. I think the real question for the planet is going to be the degrading of the preservation of habitat. And I'm trying to find the biggest bucket, because if I said climate change, I don't think that is descriptive enough. And I think if I could stop climate change today, we'd have a whole host of challenges to deal with. And that's about the health, the productivity of the habitats that we depend upon as humanity for food, water, air, all the essentials. And since our population's quadrupled in a century, since modern living requires a pretty big tax on the earth, this is what we're facing. There's no way we'd be having this conversation in the year 1800 with just 1 billion people on the planet, but with headed towards 8 billion, we're somewhere near maxing out what the Earth can provide. And so this involves, you know, thinking about all sorts of habitats and what it takes to preserve their ability to be productive. I think that's the pressing problem, is the degradation of habitat.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a real happy moment there, wasn't it? Hey, I don't know if you can get to this. I didn't write the book if I thought we were doomed. I wrote the book because I thought we can actually do this. So I'll just take an editorial moment, which is, you know, I mean, the airwaves are full of, you know, negative, doom-saying people. The whole political discourse in the country is awful, et cetera. But amazingly, there are people all over the world tackling things in productive ways that you don't necessarily hear about. And, you know, I'm fully convinced that we can do this. And if you look back 50 years and you see what were the problems, you know, facing the world then, it's amazing how many of them have been tackled in a, you know, in a constructive, in a real way. And I mean, profound things that we didn't necessarily even know we had a right to imagine that we could counter. So it's doable. You know, it is not too late. There's time to change the road we're on. I just want to get that across, because there's so much doomsaying out there. And I don't say that, you know, like, I say that sincerely. I wouldn't waste my breath if I didn't think it was true.
Yeah. Awesome, thank you. Yeah, we maybe have 2 more quick questions, if that's all right.
Yeah, 2 quick questions, 2 long answers. Okay.
We have all these relationships, like moose and wolf, where there's an overpopulation of moose, and then the wolf population rises to meet it. Or, like you said, wildebeest and lions. Eventually the lion population will overtake the wildebeest, and that keeps flip-flopping. Will nature ever find a middle ground? And then what happens after that?
Well, it does. There's great historical study of these cycles. You mentioned predator and prey, and some of those cycles have been studied for, I mean, almost 2 centuries, like lynx and rabbit in the Canadian North and things like that. And they just keep cycling, and they just keep going through these sort of little boom-bust cycles. So the rabbits build up, and there's a lot more lynx, and the rabbits crash, and a lot fewer lynx, and it keeps cycling. And you can sort of say it's in sort of this stable oscillation, right? And unless something else intervenes, it just keeps going cycling. And so if you're asking what happens when habitats kind of reach their carrying capacity, generally the population numbers just kind of oscillate around an average, up and down, up and down. And the reason why, and this is maybe the more fun thing to think about, as something starts to overshoot, because you also have to ask, why would numbers be capped at all? And, you know, the answer that I think was inherent in the way you asked the question is that, you know, they're going to run out of food, for example. They're going to run out of space and food. And so they start to die off from starvation or whatever. Their numbers start to go down. But they don't go too far down, because at a certain point, they've gone down enough that per capita, there's now enough food to support the population, and they start to come up again. So if you just sort of think about an oscillating, you know, kind of wave of numbers of something and say, why would it oscillate like that? It's just like that. A little too many, you get some die-off. Too few, you get a little rebound. Oh, too many, you get some die-off. And it's sort of doing it. That's what long-term populations look like, is not flatline like this, but oscillation. And if you throw something in there like a drought year or 2 or an El Nino or whatever, you could push that way off. But once that climate situation reverses, you'll often see the situation kind of resume back again. So it's really just these kind of oscillating around some averages is a pretty common pattern where we've been able to study it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, sure.
All right, Dr. Carroll, we're wondering what's next. What are you working on next?
Well, okay. Well, I'll tell you 2 things. Is that all right? So we have maybe about 7 films in production. So you guys have seen perhaps short films, but maybe don't know that we work on broadcast films. We also we have an IMAX film. I'm going to go down to the Amazon in August. We're shooting a film about a 19th century explorer that will be an IMAX film next year. In fact, the Pacific Science Center is our key partner on that.
In the rainforest, things are not always what they seem. a young man with a passion for nature sets out to unravel a great scientific mystery. Join Henry Bates on an epic journey of discovery and experience one of the most extraordinary adventures of all time. Amazon Adventure, based on a true story. Coming soon to IMAX and giant screen theaters.
How about that? In fact, I'm dropping into Seattle in December to help that project along. And so an IMAX movie, but I think one of the things we're really excited about is next year is the 40th anniversary of the Voyager missions, which visited the outer planets, Saturn, Jupiter, Uranus, and Neptune. And we've got a film in the works. It's by an Irish partner. It's a beautiful, funny, moving film that has the people who behind the Voyager expedition telling this story in their own words. And so we hope that's going to be a theatrical film, and something you actually can see in a large theater. And so those are, I think, one of the things we're trying to do is bring some great stories about science, to large audiences, both, inside the classrooms, but also to the public at large and where they may be. So my coming year is pretty busy on the film front with a couple of broadcast releases, and then this IMAX film and this theatrical documentary. So
awesome! Yeah, we can't wait to watch them. Again, we loved your work. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today and for being so kind and witty and funny and insightful.
Well, it's my pleasure, and really, look, it's my honor to be able to do the things that I do, and it's, our pleasure and honor to be able to make stuff that is useful and hopefully engaging for you students in the classroom, that some of these stories are just a little bit above boring. We hope overall. So if that's true, we'll just keep doing it.
Yeah, just slightly better than regular class.
Yeah, that's well, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way, better than textbooks. Better than textbooks.
Indeed. All right. Well, Dr. Carroll, thank you so much.
Thanks.